Introduction to the Bhagavad Gita by Sri Vedantist Sankaracharya. I'm using a translation by Swami Nikalananda. It's one of my favorite translations because he's inspired from the work of Swami Sankaracharya, who is a non-dualist, in a way that he's seeing the essence of the Gita as inseparable from you. That you have a choice here, that you can view the Gita from the perspective of Arjuna, who is the archer and great warrior struck in grief at the suffering of his kinsmen and bewildered with emotions. Or you could see the view of Krishna and seeing all occurrences, even Arjuna, all beings, the whole battle happening within you. And if it's within you, you're seeing from a perspective of inseparability. And this is the difference between, say, the transcendentalist and the immanent. Is God out there, or can divinity be within you? So the story of Krishna and Arjuna is taking place on a battlefield. And we're going from the perspective that all of this, from Krishna's view, is happening within you. You being consciousness itself. Because that which knows the story has a knowingness. And where this knowingness is, separate from consciousness, one cannot find that line or demarcation. That this knowing of Krishna, this knowing of the field of the Gita, is a great story of one's own mind. And the two forces going to war are the forces of dharma and adharma. This is virtue and non-virtue. So that which is setting the stage for virtue, and this is being one of my favorite stories of all time, because as Sankaracharya will outline here, it's the essence of all the Vedas, the essence of all the Upanishads, and all of the teachings from the Shastras can all be compiled into the Gita. And the Gita even then refines it with two simple pathways. The pathway of wisdom, jnana yoga, through the methods they apply through the Samkhya philosophy. Being able to differentiate and discern self from non-self. And the pathway of action, karma yoga, to act in the world, but to surrender the fruit of one's action. It's a means of purification of oneself so one can actualize the self-pervading wisdom. This is the essence of the Gita here, explaining these two paths. Add a little bit of forefront to what's laying down the circumstances that lead to this battle. Is we have Arjuna fighting on the side of the Pandavas. And the Pandavas are supposed to be guaranteed a kingdom upon return from exile. So after 12 years in exile and 1 year in hiding, they return. But then the wicked-minded king Duryodhana, who is the personification of adharma, non-virtue, he refuses to even give back a small portion of land, saying, I won't even give back the land or a piece of dirt equivalent to the tip of this needle. Krishna is an ambassador and an envoy for the Pandavas. He goes to Duryodhana just trying to work a peace agreement between the two rival families. And these families are cousins from the Solar Dynasty, going all the way back to stories of Manu and Ikshvaku, the deity of the sun. And this lineage, which Krishna is a part and has connection to both families, he's serving as the charioteer for Arjuna, one of the 5 brothers of the Pandavas. And before this battle is taking place, Arjuna and Krishna they meet. And by chance, Duryodhana, the wicked king of the Kauravas, he meets there in Krishna's temple as well. And these 3 meet while Krishna is laying down. He's waking up from his sleep, and Arjuna is at his feet, and Duryodhana is at his head. And they both come there to ask Krishna for a boon, a gift for this war that's about to take place. And Krishna, who has empathy and compassion for both sides, he's a non-dualist. He sees the whole universe within him. He's equivalent to all, but he's very loyal to the devoted. And he says that he'll grant them both a boon, grant them both a favor. But he sees Duryodhana first. So he grants Duryodhana, he sees Duryodhana first, but Arjuna was there first, really. So they're fighting who gets to ask the first boon. And Krishna says, we'll let you choose. You can choose either between my army of the most frightening fighters and greatest warriors on the planet who cannot die. They have to will their own death, the greatest warriors in the world. Or you can choose me, Vasudeva. And immediately Duryodhana, representing the materialistic mind, he's like, hell, of course I'm going for the army. Krishna, grant me your army, please. And Arjuna, with no question in his mind, like, I'll take you, Vasudeva. You I want by my side. May you be my charioteer. May you lead me in this battle. My comforter, my soul, my journeyman. And so Duryodhana leaves with the right to use Krishna's army in the battle. And Arjuna, he acquires Krishna's aid as his charioteer. And when Arjuna is asked, why did you choose me? And he's like, you were everything. It's, you were everything to me. True loyalty, a true friend. So, some of these events lead to the war. And a couple of other backgrounds on the war that's about to take place is it's over a kingdom, over sovereignty of the earth. We have to see that this story is not out there. The sovereignty that's to be acquired is the sovereignty of mind. The one acquires lordship over the entire earth. It's no small feat. The great warriors who are lining up to fight, if they die on the battlefield, it is said that one acquires sovereignty of the heavens. So one enjoys the heavens even if one dies, or one enjoys the earth. And a portal opens up. And it's said on the 18th day of the war, and then on many other auspicious days, one could see celestials in the sky and many angelics viewing this scene, especially in the end battle between Karna and Arjuna. So that Brahma, Rudra, and many of the celestials with Indra and the Maruts at the head were observing from the skies. So, what led to one of these major conflicts of the two families was the rape of Draupadi. This is the wife of the Pandavas. They have a collective wife they hold. And the king of the Pandavas, Yudhishthira, he loses Draupadi in a game of dice, knowing that his weakness is to refuse a battle. Shakuni, the wicked administrator of the Kauravas, he entices Yudhishthira to a game of dice and loads the dice so that he would never lose. And Yudhishthira, intuiting that this game is kind of rigged, he still plays. But his warrior attitude to refuse the call to battle, seeing this as a battle, and even offering the stakes, elephants he's offering, maids he's offering, palaces and kingdoms he's offering his clothes. Eventually, when he has nothing left, he offers his brothers and he offers his wife. He loses it all in the game of dice. Duryodhana, the wicked king, pulls Draupadi, their wife, while she's on her menstruation, on her period. Duryodhana grabs, or Dushasana, Duryodhana's brother, grabs her by the hair and pulls her out into the court of assembly of kings. At this time, she's humiliated because she's in her menstruation garments, these white cloths, a towel, just getting out of the bath, and she's in tears, sobbing. She's has blood on her face from being, I think, smacked in the face from Dushasana, and kind of just bewildered. What's going on? Why did my husband sell me? And where she's getting at is she asks the question, did Yudhishthira, my husband, offer me after losing himself, after offering himself at the game of dice, which he did? So Draupadi is able to win this argument in the assembly of kings that a man who has already lost, he's sold it, he's lost himself, how can he wager me? How can I be wagered as a bet if the king has already lost himself? And it's through the grace of Draupadi, through the grace of the divine feminine, that the Pandavas, they're regained a favor through Draupadi. The blind king of the Kauravas, Dhritarashtra, says, I'll grant you 3 boons. The first boon she asks is may all of their belongings be restored to the Pandavas. May it all just be restored. I don't want any more war. The second boon those offers, may the Pandavas gain their freedom back. And the third, she said, now that they're free, they can handle themselves. I've done enough. I don't wish for a third boon. This frees the Pandavas, and they feel like they got away by the wisp of their hair. But Yudhishthira is still having that weakness. A week passes by, and he's challenged again. And this time he sees as this must be fate. This must be destiny, as I can't seem to escape it. And knowing that the time may come where he loses everything, he prepares for this final battle of dice. And he does lose everything in this battle. And the Pandavas are sent to 12 years in exile. With the promise of the 13th year, they must remain hidden in secrecy. And if they are found, they have to go for a remaining 12 years hidden in the forest. So after the 12th year, they hide in the kingdom of Virata. They hide as variant servants of the king. Bhima, one of the brothers, he hides as a cook. The two brothers, Nakula and Sahadev, they hide as cowherdsmen tending the horses in the pastures. Draupadi attends the princess of Virata as one of her maids, and Yudhishthira attends as an administrator for the king, saying, I worked for the King Yudhishthira the Great, the Just, when he was secretly King Yudhishthira the Just. But because of his aura, he was able to work as a great administrator in the palace and maintain their secrecy of who they really were. And this is symbolic in a way of being great beings. They really represent the five senses, with Draupadi representing the mind. Being in the world, integrating in the world, and then just having to veil themselves to hide in secrecy until the time of the unveiling. After the 13th year, you have the unveiling. And now the Virata kingdom is under the lordship of the Kauravas. The Kauravas now want to wage war with the Viratas. So Arjuna, who was secretly working as a dancer in the Virata kingdom there, he had the name of Dushasala. And he was represented as an androgynous transgender type of being, and he worked for the kingdom. He had to they checked his genitals and everything, and he was feminine because of a curse that he received while working in the forest doing penances and austerities, when he met Indra and one of the chief maidens there. He refused the sexual advances of the maiden, because no, like, I'm doing these penances to receive these celestial weapons I need for the war. Her name was Urvashi. Refusing Urvashi's sexual advances, Urvashi felt ashamed. Like, I've been with the greatest warriors in the world. I've slept with the best men, warriors who have won the earth time and time again, and you're refusing me? She was so stunned that she cursed Arjuna. May you experience your 13th year as an androgynous being. May you be the neuter sex. May you lose all your masculinity. May you not be a man. And in the 13th year, okay, you can get back your masculinity. So he hides. He hides in this 13th year as a dancer. And he's got the long hair. He has his bow, and he finally reveals to the king of Virata, my 13th year is up. I'm really the great archer Arjuna. And he's ready to wage the war against the Kauravas. But his first mission now is to protect the kingdom of his allies, because the king of Virata, they have protected them, protected the Pandavas in this time of siege. And Arjuna, now he rides on his chariot with the king's son by his side. He reveals himself as Arjuna, the great archer. And the Kauravas now marching in, Bhima and their teacher Drona, Kripa, Karna, Duryodhana, all these great warriors, and Akshahinis, these troops that can fight thousands of warriors on the battlefield. And as they're going, Arjuna single-handedly dismantles all of them through the celestial weapons he's acquired. He's able to cast an illusion-like spell and put them to sleep, and dismantling them. The only one he wasn't able to really dismantle is Karna, who becomes his arch enemy throughout the 18-day war of Kurukshetra. Everyone is stunned. It's like, only person who can do this is Arjuna, the greatest warrior in the world. And they realize that the Pandavas have returned. They've made their statement back in the world that they want their kingdom. They're ready. So through the consultation of Bhishma, which is the grandfather of both the Kauravas and the Pandavas, they decide to try to make peace agreements first before the wage of the war happens. And fortunately, Duryodhana wouldn't even refuse a dirt the size of the tip of a needle. Wouldn't even... Yudhishthira asks for 5 small villages, refuses to give even that. So, and after their wife has been raped, abused, humiliated in front of the kings, the wife, Draupadi, says, I'm not even going to wash my hair until it's time. So that happens. And now it's time for the war. Both families are lining up on the battlefield, the Kauravas and the Pandavas. And at that instant, the magnanimity of the event strikes Arjuna's heart. And he goes into the battlefield and he's just kind of struck by bewilderment. And think of these as the two sides, the two rivers here within our body, the Ida and the Pingala, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic system. Arjuna, he's representing the side of the moon, the parasympathetic system. He's got his lunar ornaments on, the color of silver. And Krishna, he has the side of the sun, while Duryodhana, all of the ornaments there are like a sea of gold, and they're playing their bugles. The drums and the musicians are there. They're sounding their conchs and bugles, and there's a great array, a vast army of warriors ready to lay down their life in battle. So Arjuna asks to be led to the center. And in the center, this is like the central channel. He's communicating with the divine. And Krishna is his charioteer. Krishna here represents the great mind, the supreme self. And he's holding the reins, which represents the intellect which steers the senses. And Arjuna has 5 white steeds representing the 5 senses: sound, taste, touch, smell, and sight. His standard, his banner he's waving, is the banner of Hanuman, of the monkey, symbolizing devotion to the Supreme. His chariot is the body. And on the battlefield, he lays down his Gandhaiva. And he says to Krishna, I won't fight. I won't do it. Laying down the most basic argument he can. What good would it be for me to wage war, to fight my own kinsmen in battle, to lose my very life? Wouldn't it be better for me to just be a domestic, to be a wanderer, to not engage at all in this gruesome experiment? Krishna, my mind is bewildered. I need your help. Help bring some clarity to me, for I'm so confused. Oh, Vasudeva, he smiles. I think this moment he knows that what he says is going to be recorded for all time. And those who have the celestial eye of vision, who like Sanjaya, who's narrating the story to the blind king of the Kauravas, Dhritarashtra. This story is being told from the boon that Vyasa gave to Sanjaya that you may see. It wasn't given to Dhritarashtra, for he did not want to see his sons dying. He did not want to see that gruesome death. It was easier for him to hear it through the words of Sanjaya, his trusted charioteer. And so, as Arjuna and Krishna are standing there, he smiles. This is the beginning of the Gita. The words that come forth and are spoken since are the great words that we'll lead into in the following chapters. So that's the preamble, the events detailed in the Mahabharata, and the Bhagavad Gita, which is the crucial point at the beginning of the war and the turning point of the battle between adharma and adharma that one must engage with in this very life. So, the introduction by Sankaracharya. It says, Om Narayana. So, Narayana is the Supreme Lord. The one who, Nara is the ocean and Ayana is the home. So the one who rests upon the great ocean, the ocean of consciousness. Om Narayana, who is beyond the unmanifest. The golden egg, just the five senses, fine, is produced from the unmanifest, arising from the field of silence. The earth, with its 7 islands and all other worlds, are in the egg. So the 7 islands represent the 5 senses, the mind, the 5 senses, the mind, ahamkara, which is ego, and that's it. And the Purusha. 5 senses: earth, air, water, fire, space, intellect, and I, ahamkara. 7 islands. The Lord created the earth and desired its continuance. With that aim, he first created the Prajapatis. These are the co-creators of the world. Marichi and the rest, and taught them the Dharma characterized by pravriti, or activity, as described in the Vedas. So pravriti is the pathway of action that's outlined and recommended to Arjuna in later chapters to act in the world for the stability of order. He then created others, Shanaka, Sanandana, and the rest, and taught them the Dharma of nivritti. So for those who otherwise to be as co-creators in the aspect of the mind of the unmanifest, he taught the yoga of wisdom, of renunciation. Or renunciation characterized by knowledge and non-attachment. Of 2 kinds is the Dharma dealt with in the Vedas, the one characterized by activity and the other by renunciation. This twofold Dharma, the cause of the stability of the world order, and also the direct means by which men attain prosperity and the highest good. The highest good meaning liberation. Liberation of the world and of the 5 senses. Was followed by members of the different castes, the Brahmin, the Kshatriya, and the rest. And of the different ashramas. So these are ways that the Prajapatis, the co-creators of the world, organize existence into caste for the stability and order and propagation of the Dharma. The Kshatriyas represented the mental activity, the Brahmins represented the mental activity, the Kshatriyas represented the orderly and judicial activity, and stabilizing activity. The Vaisyas represented the generative ability, such as cow herding, agriculture, and so on. And the Sudras represented the service-oriented activity. That order was also characterized into 4 modes of life called ashrams. There is the Brahmacharya Ashram, where one spends their life learning, cultivating knowledge. The ashram of the Grihastha, after your education, you now work with the religion of pravriti, of action. You're now being in the world. You raise a wife, you have a wife, family, you raise kids for the continuity and stability of the world. You're playing an active role. You have a career and you feed the system. Then the vanaprastya, which is now you've focused on the contemplation of nature itself, and you're led towards a life of renouncing the worldly order. You're retiring into the forest, and then finally the choice to surrender it all up and give it to the spiritual life is the sannyasin, the mendicant, the one who is now he's renounced of the renounced order, also known as a twice-born, as you're born again in this world with a spiritual birth. So, desirous to secure their welfare, people practiced the Vedic Dharma for a long time. Then lust arose among them. Discrimination and wisdom declined. Unrighteousness began to outweigh righteousness. Thus, when unrighteousness prevailed in the world, Vishnu, the first creator, also known as Narayana, wishing to ensure the continuance of the universe, incarnated himself in part as Krishna. So, understand that the Krishna's role in this is that he's operating as the supreme. Vishnu here, so Vishnu represents the all-pervading. Narayana is another epithet for resting upon the sea of cosmic consciousness. The manifested form that one sees beyond the unmanifest is what's perceived as Krishna. But in reality is Vishnu. So those who see it as just ignorance, they see only a form. Krishna, he's just a man. But those with the celestial eye, the eye of vision, will see him as Narayana, the all-pervading, resting upon the cosmic ocean, dreaming this into existence. This is why Arjuna chose him as his charioteer rather than the army, because the army was inside of him. So he was born to Devaki and Vasudeva for the protection of the Brahmins on earth and their spiritual ideal. By the protection of the Brahmin ideal, the Dharma of the Vedas is preserved, since all the different castes and ashrams are under its control. The Lord, the eternal possessor of knowledge, sovereignty, power, strength, energy, and vigor, brings under his control Maya, belonging to him, as Vishnu, the primordial nature, characterized by the 3 gunas. And then, through that Maya, he is seen as though born, as though endowed with the body, and as though showing compassion to men, for he is in reality unborn, unchanging, the Lord of all created beings, and the nature eternal, pure, illumined, and free. So this is what I mean when I'm saying that the Krishna, for those who can't see, they see just a man. For those who can see, they see all beings in him. This is the view. And the view that we're trying to uphold and maintain there, to even now see all things, all appearances. You see everything as the ocean. All appearances are just waves upon this ocean. And Narayana is what rests upon the ocean. It's not perturbed upon the ocean. It's like a lotus. It's not stained by it. Through the Lord, had no purpose of his own to serve, yet with the sole desire of bestowing favor upon men, he taught the twofold Vedic Dharma to Arjuna, who was deeply sunk in the ocean of grief and delusion. For Dharma spreads and grows when it is accepted by high-minded persons. So the 2 Dharmas that are taught, the Dharma of Nivritti, that of wisdom, and the Dharma of pravriti, that of action. We'll get into this in the later chapters. It is this Dharma taught by the Lord that the omniscient and venerable Vyasa, the compiler of the Vedas, embodied in 700 verses under the name of the Gita. So Vyasa, who is another awakened being of the Brahmin caste, he's the compiler of the Vedas. He's organized it. He's brought it from the celestial realms, embodied it, wrote it down. And this whole story of the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita came from Vyasa, who is just another extension and manifestation of Narayana. This is why in the epithets of Vyasa, he wrote the story, he's also called Sri Krishna Dryapa Vyasa. Sri Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa. Which means the lake-born Vyasa. This scripture, the Gita, is a compendium of the essential teachings of the whole of the Vedas, which means it's complete. Complete, the whole. All of the awakened beings that I just mentioned, Devaki, Vasudeva, the Marichis, Sanat Kumara, and everything that was compiled from the Vedas, this is the essence. Right here. If you get this, you don't need to read the whole Vedas. It's all here. So its meaning is extremely difficult to grasp. This is a very difficult task. I'm trying to walk you guys through. But let's do it. Let's do it. This is my favorite topic. And I'm really honored to walk this with you. So stick with me. Stick with me. Many commentators desiring to present a clear idea of that meaning have explained the words and the meaning of the words and of the sentences, and also the arguments. But I find that to people of ordinary understanding, these explanations convey diverse and contradictory meanings. Therefore, I intend to write a brief commentary on the Gita with the view to determine precisely what it signifies. So, this is the danger here of trying to convey the Gita, and I'm laying this as a preamble, that I'm using Sankaracharya's introduction to lay the purpose of why we're studying this. Purpose of liberation and the purpose of understanding the twofold Dharma here. Because as Sankaracharya is saying, there are many commentators of the Gita who will give you manifold explanations and can quite possibly lead you astray. This is why it's important to have a proper guide. Sankaracharya I consider as a proper guide in this context. He's the father of Advaita Vedanta, the non-dual school of teachings in of the Sanatana Dharma. The ultimate aim of the Gita is, in a word, the attainment of the highest good being liberation, characterized by the complete cessation of relative existence and its cause. So when you're dissolving now seeing the world and your spiritual life as two separate things, the dissolvement of the relative existence means that the unification, the yoga of the relative and the absolute. This is the union of Prakriti and Purusha. This is realized by means of that Dharma whose essence is devotion to self-knowledge, attained through the renunciation of all action. So self-knowledge here is referred to as the fruit of the yoga of renunciation, the fruit of wisdom. The wisdom that is attained is the knowledge of self. And with reference to this Dharma laid down in the Gita, the Lord says in the Anugita, that Dharma is quite sufficient for the knowledge of Brahman. This is sufficient. So to understand the essence of the Gita, all that is necessary for the knowing of the self is complete here. So you're laying down the perfection. if you take the teacher's word, for example, that this Dharma is quite sufficient for the knowledge of Brahman. Mahabharata chapter on the Ashrameta sacrifice. So, in the same treatise, it is said, he is without righteousness and without unrighteousness, which means he is absorbed in the one goal, silent and without thinking. Going beyond a state of thought, beyond a state of conceptuality. Knowledge is characterized by renunciation. So one who knows and has the discriminating knowledge, the discerning wisdom of all that is self from non-self. We characterize that activity as renunciation. So in the concluding chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna, abandon all dharmas and come to me alone for shelter. This is what is meant by going beyond all concepts. All dharmas here is a representation of all concepts, all ways of thinking, all distortions of mind, all identities. Come to him alone represents the single pointedness of mind, samadhi, that will shoot like a laser through the bhakti of devotion to the imperishable self, the absolute Paramatman, which we see in embodied form represented by Sri Krishna. But is in actuality the absolute Purusha, all-pervading spirit. The Dharma, characterized by activity and prescribed for the different castes and ashrams, is no doubt a means of securing worldly welfare and also attaining the regions of the gods. But when it is practiced in a spirit of complete surrender to the Lord being Narayana, he who rests upon the ocean, which means the awareness that perceives the world of appearances. And without desire for fruit means he's surrendering the objects of the senses. It leads to the purification of the mind. A man of pure mind becomes fit to acquire devotion to the path of knowledge and attains knowledge. Thus, by means of the Dharma of activity, one ultimately realizes the highest good. With this view in mind, the Lord says in the Gita, he who works without attachment, resigning his actions to Brahman. The yogis act without attachment for the purification of the heart. The bridge, man. This is what it's all about. Pure the heart. So, why we're studying this? Twofold purpose. The purpose of the twofold Dharma described in the Gita is, number one, the attainment of the highest good, liberation, that is complete, perfect path. Which means you do not need to read other books. The wise have said you can take the Gita as a complete path. Complete. The subject matter of the treatise is the supreme reality. So this is knowledge of the highest self, self-knowledge, self-actualization. Understanding this, you understand reality and all that appears happening within the self. What the self is, you will understand by understanding Krishna. Who is Krishna? The embodied self. What self is embodied? The ultimate. Who's the ultimate? One who's resting on the ocean. What's the ocean? Cosmic consciousness. Who's resting on it? Presence. Who's present? The Lord. Who's the Lord? The all-pervading. Who's the all-pervading? The Spirit. Who's the Spirit? The Purusha. What's the Purusha? I don't know, man. It's beyond name after that. But that's what we're getting at. So it expounds both in a special manner. Thus, the Gita treats of a specific subject with a specific end in view. And there is a specific relation between the subject matter and the object. So, three things here. The subject is of the twofold dharma. The dharma of nivriti, of wisdom, and the dharma of property, of action. The specific end in view is the view of liberation. And the specific relation between the subject matter and the object is the self-knowledge of the supreme reality of existence. Knowledge of the Gita enables one to attain the goal of all human aspiration, hence my attempts to explain its teachings, which means that by understanding the Gita, everything that one desires, all purposes, all attainments, all dreams, all goals, all motivations, all thoughts, all intentions, where else would it reside but within the ocean of consciousness? And who rests upon the ocean of consciousness? There's the great Lord. And the embodiment of the Lord we would understand as the Word, spoken to the heartbroken, dismantled Arjuna, who humbly seeks the help of Sri Krishna, for he sees that, I'm sorry that I saw you as just an ordinary man. I'm sorry I saw you and I spoke to you in jest. I'm sorry I said things I didn't mean. I see you now as the Supreme. Please forgive me. Hence, we have the Gita. That's Sankaracharya's introduction, the purpose, why we're learning it, why we're studying it. See you in chapter 1.